Hey guys, Beast here. Today I'll be talking about the balance patch that happened recently. So the way I'll do this is I will talk about every single change that happened and how it will affect each matchup in my opinion and what I think about it in general. Okay, so let's get started. Reaper. KDA charge cooldown increased from 7 to 14 seconds. Now, TVP, this doesn't really change anything. You use Reaper in TVP for just scouting. You maybe get 1 or 2 grenades off. Not really a big change. It will remain pretty much unaffected. TVT, this will improve TVT in my opinion. We all know that TVT can sometimes be very coin flippy in the early game with a couple of Reapers fighting each other and the grenades hitting. So I actually like this change for TVT. It becomes TVT early games becomes a little bit more stable, less volatile. The biggest change that will happen with this nerf will be in TVZ. So we all know that 3-Rax Reaper is pretty popular in TVZ. It makes the Zerg pressure for right from start, not allowing them to get fast 3 hatch. And this change will affect that build the most. I'm actually not sure if 3-Rax Reaper will be unplayable after this. It's definitely a nerf. And this change will have 2 outcomes as long as TVZ 3-Rax goes. It will either just nerf slightly the strategy and make it more balanced, but the players will still have option to go for 3-Rax Reaper, and still go for it, pressure the Zerg. Or the second one, which I'm fearing, is that it will completely kill the 3-Rax Reaper because, there's things that are better that you can do against Zerg. So I hope it doesn't come to it. I really hate changes that basically kill a playstyle or kill a build order. I always extremely disagree with that. I think going from 7 to 14 is a bit extreme. I would have liked Blizzard to go from 7 to 10 or 7 to 12 seconds. Doubling it seems a bit excessive, but overall I think it's a good change. I would have liked to see it a bit, 7 to 10, like I said, 7 to 12 seconds. But overall, I like it, especially because of TVT. And I'm not someone who uses 3-Rax Reaper against Zerg too often, so I don't mind this change at all. Now, Widowmine Splash Nerf. This one is actually pretty big, and I want to touch on the Liberator nerf as well because I haven't talked about it in any of my videos. I see when people make these balance patch reviews or just talk about on other streams about the Liberator nerf, they always say, oh, Liberator got a minor damage nerf, but that's extremely misleading. Yes, the damage only got nerfed by 10, but the nerf itself is huge. As we know, it affected TVP the most. That's why the Liberator change was introduced to the game. But the Liberator change nerf is huge because basically you went from 2-shotting Stalkers to 3-shotting them. You went for 1-shotting Sentries to 2-shotting them. So when you have these big engagements with a lot of Stalkers, you trade much worse than you used to. Now, I do think that TVP was favored for Terran because of the Siege things being buffed and now Siege Tank Liberator pushes were strong. Agree with that. The Liberator should have been nerfed. And we've seen that the win rates are stabilizing. We've seen Protosses in GSL do a lot better. They defeated 2 of the Protosses, defeated the 2 Terrans they've played. Stats reached the finals of IM Katowice, lost TY 4-3, but could have gone either way. So I think TVP after Liberator nerf stabilized quite a bit as far as win rates go. And I think just because that change was a couple of weeks ago, I think making the Widowmine splash bonus reduced from 40 to 25 is rushing things way too much. Blizzard needs to give more time to pro players and players in general, doesn't matter what league you are, to figure out things. There's so many things in this game that took so long to figure out. For example, when the 3-Rax Reaper started, people were dying to it. Like, not lose drones and die after. People were just straight up dying on start, like just losing everything, losing queens, losing links. And we've come to this point where they're able to defend, but they get behind, which is why the Reaper KDA charge nerf. And the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you just need to let changes stay there for a bit, and if it doesn't work out, you can change it. You can always nerf or buff something if needed. I just feel that this specific change with the mine is way too rushed, because the Liberator nerf was not too long ago, and Blizzard should have given players more time, especially because the win rates are a lot better for Protoss these days. And we've seen Protoss strategies revert back to Oracle after expanding into Fast 3 Nexus, Mass Phoenix Adept, because that counters the siege tank play, and it's just a pretty good build for Protoss in the current meta. And this Widowmine splash change will not really affect Terran against Colossus or against Disruptors, but it will heavily affect the matchup when the Protoss is going Phoenix Adept, which is what we've seen a lot from Zest stats in games in GSL and in games in IEM Katowice. So I'm actually really worried about this change. I don't think it's a good change at all. Strategy Adept Phoenix has become extremely popular and extremely strong against Terran players, and nerfing the main unit that was dealing with that strategy, I think, is the wrong way to go about it, even if the change is needed, because you cannot really make siege tanks against adepts, you cannot really make liberators because of Phoenix, you can't rely on liberators to clear up the adepts, is what I mean, and you don't really have any other units. Your Widowmine is go-to to deal with that unit composition because it trades well against Phoenix and against adepts. Overall, I think this change is extremely rushed, and it will tip the scale into Protoss quite a bit, and you will see a lot more one-dimensional play with Protosses going Stargate, Phoenix, Adept pretty much every game after this. Now let's obviously this is only affecting TVP, the Widowmine splash, because of the shield bonus thing, so no need to talk about the other two matchups. Let's move on to the Zerg and the Hydralisk buff. Now this Hydralisk buff, I'm actually not sure why, I'm not sure if Blizzard mentioned why they did this buff. I think it was probably because of the carriers, or ZVP in general. In ZVZ, I mean, it's a mirror matchup, right? So it doesn't really change too much. You might see a Roach Hydra a bit more, but I really doubt it. Now, in TVZ, this makes a huge difference. And I want to go on a bit of a longer rant, and I'll go through both Hydralisk and Corruptor at the same time. We've heard from Blizzard for years now how they want to make mech viable, but I feel like all they're doing is nerfing mech with each patch. I think the Cyclone that is today is a lot worse than what it was. I preferred the old Cyclone, for example. I just wish they gave it a little bit of health to be that stable mech unit that you can micro and kite. They buffed the siege tank, yes, but you can't make mech viable if you buff one unit and then you buff 3 units that counter it, or counter mech in general, because that doesn't really work that way, especially because you're buffing Hydralisks and Corruptors against Protoss, but I'm not sure if Blizzard realizes they're nerfing mech even more because of this, indirectly. Corruptor, I mean, you need air control when you play mech, no matter against what race, so buffing Corruptors ruins the mech even more, makes it even less viable. Buffing Hydralisk, Hydra Viper is extremely popular unit composition against mech, which again, you know, mech will become even worse after this patch, so I really dislike these changes for that reason. Now, I'll go back to talking about Hydra and ZVP. I think that Some of you guys know that I play Protoss quite a bit. I'm in GM with Protoss as well. And me looking at this and thinking like a Protoss player, the Corruptor and Hydralisk change, even though they're targeting carriers with these two buffs, I'm not actually thinking like, oh yeah, maybe I should not go for fast 3-base carrier because of this. I actually want to do it more. And the reason for that is the Hydralisk buff will not change almost anything against carriers. Yes, it's a buff, it's always good, but it will not be game breaking against carriers where carriers just suddenly die against Hydra pushes. That will not happen. What will happen is the Link Bane Hydra versus ground will become even stronger because the Baneling was buffed recently with the health, and now the Hydra health gets buffed as well. And I think with this, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that Storm does not kill Hydras anymore with one Storm. So the Link Bane Hydra timings will become even stronger. And again, me thinking as a Protoss player, if I were to play, I would go carries even more because of these changes and not less. Now let's talk about Corruptor change. Yesterday I played Protoss. I wasn't streaming or anything. I just played Protoss on the ladder, and I went 3-base carrier. I did not even notice that the patch was live. That's how bad the Corruptor change is. I honestly did not even notice. The numbers are not insignificant. They're pretty big buffs, I would say, to the movement speed and attack speed. Not at any point I felt that Corruptors were stronger or better. And this is probably one of the worst changes I've seen when targeting something specific, like nerfing specific unit. Buffing specific unit against another unit. Because problem with carriers, Blizzard has completely wrong approach about this. They think that the problem with carriers is getting to them and killing them. That's not the problem. Problem is if you get to the carrier range, you're probably going to lose your whole army because of storms, archons, void rays, cannons, pylon overcharge, and the carriers themselves. Before, the way you were dealing with carriers is you would kill the interceptors because interceptor costed 25 minerals. Now they cost way less. So before you would go Queen Hydra, kill the interceptors, and Protoss would run out of money. Now you have to actually kill the carriers themselves to deal with them. And that's simply not possible, not because it's hard to get to them, but because your units die if you go that close because of storm, because of pylon overcharge, force fields, archons, and so on. When you play Protoss and you face Hydras, you keep making carriers because, you're going carriers. And you're slowly going to transition into Storm. When you play carriers and you meet you meet Corruptors, you switch into Void Rays. You don't keep making carriers, sorry. Because if the opponent is going for Corruptor, you go Void Ray, which counter them while taking to Storm and Archon, which brings us to the same spot, which is late game, where the Corruptor movement speed will not change absolutely anything. Yes, it's a buff, but it's not going to make carrier builds any less viable. Because the Storm and the Archons are what kills the Corruptors, not the carriers themselves. Because of all the splash and the way that air units work. So this change, if you want to nerf carriers, it's absolutely not the way to go about it. This will not change anything. Absolutely anything. And the only thing that this change does is ruin mech even more, nothing else. That's pretty much everything I have to say about the changes. Overall, the one thing I approve of would be the Reaper change. The Widowmine is completely unnecessary. Hydralisk and Corruptor just are completely wrong way to go about it. And I wanted to talk about something else that's not balance related. You guys know that, like I mentioned earlier, for years we've been hearing Blizzard wanting to make mech viable, but they keep buffing units that are good against mech. They say that they want you to play mech. They give you this new tanky Cyclone, but then they give Zealots more movement speed, and when it charges, it deals damage on the hit. They buffed carriers as well with the way AI works. Now they're buffing Hydras. Now they're buffing corruptors, and they buffed swarm hosts. And at this point, I just feel that Blizzard is saying that they're trying to make viable, just so people would stop asking about it. Because I don't really see anything done to make it viable. All I see is every once in a while they throw in this random buff, and then they buff 5 units at counter mech and making it even less viable. Now, this is not balance whining. I honestly, I gave up on mech. I don't think mech will ever be viable as much as bio is, simply because Blizzard refuses to do something about it. And they do these changes that just nerf mech even more without thinking about it or considering it. The point I'm trying to make is, once again, I don't want people to be like that, saying that I'm balance whining. It's not about balance, it's about options. Me as a Terran player, I've been playing Terran for the past 7 years. I feel extremely forced to go bio every game because the other two things are not viable. Sky Terran is not viable, and Mech Terran is not viable. And that's what I dislike about this. With every patch and every change as we go into the future, I feel like as a Terran player, I have less and less options in the game, what I can do. And it feels that every time they add something in Heart of the Swarm or Legacy of the Void, it just reverts slowly back to Marine Marauder Medevac. And I dislike that extremely because the game becomes repetitive, it becomes boring. These days, it's very hard from Terran point of view to have fun in the game because you're doing the same things. And every time the Terran players discover something new, it gets nerfed to the point where it's not viable anymore, which is why I said that 3-Rex Reaper, I hope it doesn't become that. I hope the strategy doesn't die, because me as a viewer, I don't play 3-Rex Reaper, but I like watching it, every now and then. And I want to say that during Legacy of the Void beta was the best and the most fun time for me I've ever had in StarCraft. And the reason for that is very simple. Yes, Liberators were very broken. I know someone will say that. Yes, they were very broken. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is every game felt like I was exploring the game. Like, I would do a build, and then the next game I'd be like, well, what if I follow it up with this? What if I follow up with this? Because a lot of units were viable. You had the option to go mech. You had the option to go bio. You had the option to go Cyclone bio. You had the option to go Cyclone Hellions against Zerg and against Protoss. You had the option to go Sky Terran. You even had the option to open one base against Zerg with 1-1-1 and harass with Liberators. And I enjoyed that so much because I felt like that was it was a strategy game. It wasn't this mindless mechanical play constantly what it is now with bio. It was a strategy game where I was picking strategy based off of a map, and I was picking my openings. If the map had a cliff, I would make a siege tank with a tank evac and try to harass with it, maybe open even at one base. While these days all the maps are so bland, to just forcing you to go macro and to go bio and to play mechanically, and it's just not fun. Which is the whole point of this talk. Also, I want to touch on another thing is 6 months ago, some of you might remember the Sky Terran build that was extremely viable at the time, which you would open with Cloak Banshee or Liberator range, and then you would just transition into Sky Terran from then on. I loved that. That for me was so much fun because I've never played that type of Terran ever before. I didn't make mech units, I didn't make buy units, I just went straight to Sky Terran, and the whole game against Zerg turned into this positional play, which I feel that Terran should be about. with sieging up liberators or proper spots, expanding, harassing with banshees, the Zerg had to respond with different units. We saw a lot of different units being made because of it, because you're making air, so he can't make Zergling Baneling. And that was so much fun for me. And then when the Liberator got nerfed, the range, the damage, the strategy just died completely. And again, I want to say Liberator was too strong. I agree with that 100%. But do something differently so that the strategy still is viable, but it just changed in some way that it's not as strong early game, mid game, or late game, depending where it is actually strong. I'll give an example for that. If you want to nerf carrier, you cannot do these random buffs to Hydralisks, to corruptors, because you're ruining ZVT mech that way. And it makes me sad that Blizzard doesn't even consider or cares about it, because in logical world, if you buff 2 units that are good against mech, you should give mech compensation against Zerg. But that will not happen. If you want to nerf the carrier, stop buffing units that will affect the other 2 matchups. What you need to do is nerf the carrier. That's how you solve the problem. It's very simple. If you want to, nerf the adept, you don't need to buff marauders or buff siege things. You just need to nerf the adept. It's really that simple. The way you want to nerf carrier is increasing the mineral cost of interceptor. You don't need to do it back to 25, increase it back to 20. Or you can increase the build time, because carriers and battle cruisers and broodlords are supposed to be your tier 3 units that are extremely strong. And they should be extremely strong. But you shouldn't be able to rush them out, which is the carrier problem. They're traded way too cost efficiently, which is why you increase the interceptor cost. And they can be rushed, which is a problem. What Blizzard needs to do is remove these 2 changes with Hydralisk and Corruptor, increase the carrier build time so it cannot be rushed, because if you try to rush carriers, then super early you will just die to any Zerg push. But leaving the carrier stats the way statistics the way they are, or stats, will still make them viable in the late game if you manage to properly transition into them, and it will not force the Zerg to all in with Hydra timings or Corruptor timings, but it will have smooth transition to the late game, and that's it. And that way you don't ruin the other 2 matchups, because if you increase the carrier build time or interceptor cost, it will not change anything in PvP, and it will not do anything in PvT either. Yes, the interceptor would be a nerf, but how often do you see carriers in PvT anyway? I went on a little bit of a rant at the end. I just wanted to say this for a long time. I want Blizzard to stop making nerfs and buffs. I want them to stop buffing units to counter another unit rather than just change that unit. That's all you need. Because this way you're messing with the other 2 matchups, and it's just not the way to go about things. And I just would like to see more diversity in the strategies, because it feels like we're going into this dark tunnel where Terran can only really open 1 or 2 things against Protoss or Zerg and in TVT. And I would just like to see more diversity, more mech, more Sky Terran, and that's it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this, and tell me what you think in the comments about these patches. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.